Okay, so right now let's go ahead and do something interesting to identify the type of data structure we're dealing with. So we have, from this exercise we did in the previous lesson, we have a list and we have a tuple. Does Python see it that way? Well, we have a function called type that we could use to verify the data type we're dealing with. So for example, let's say I had num equals 4 and I type this, print type of num. I want to know what this is. Obviously we're going to get all of this printed again, but notice at the bottom here it tells me it's an integer, right? So the type function here allows me to figure out, okay, num, as I've declared it here, is of type integers. Now let's change it to 4.0. Let's see what happens. And then if I do that, it tells me it's a float. Let's change that to a string. Hi. Okay, so let's see what happens. And it tells me it's a string. Okay, so can I get the same kind of information if I'm dealing with a tuple or if I'm dealing with a list? So we have my list right here. Let's see what we get out of that, which we already decided it will be a list, right? And there you have it. It's a data type list. Now, what about my tuple? So does it see it as an object of type tuple? And sure enough, it does see it as an object of type tuple, since that is what we did right here when we wrote over, right, the tuple we already had. So now that takes us to, so let's leave that one here and let's do my tuple. I want to show you something interesting here. And Joe, and you got to make it equal to, and comma Henry. So we know at least we have 2 items in here, right? And let's put an H here, right? So if I run this again, it will see it as a tuple. Now, what if I had 1 item only? Let's see what it sees it as. This is very important. Take notes. It sees it as a string. So this is very important with tuples. So this is no longer a tuple. So how do you make this a tuple if you only needed 1 item in it? Put a comma. Okay, so that's an intricacy here that you need to take care of. And notice now it sees it as a tuple. Okay, now if you do have 2 items, and let's put a 7, I don't need a comma after 7 for this to be a tuple. Okay, so if I run this, it will see it as a tuple. That is not a problem at all. Okay, having seen this, now let's say we have this tuple, and let's do another tuple. My tuple 2 equals 7, 8.9, right? All right, so I have 2 tuples. I can print them. Print my tuple. And then I can print my tuple 2 as well. So that's a good baseline to start from. Notice here I've got 2 distinct tuples. Now, can I merge these 2 together into a single tuple? Can I do kind of an operation? So let's call it my tuple 3 is going to be equal to my tuple. Now we could have called this one my tuple 1 if you want, plus my tuple 2. And now let's go ahead and print my tuple 3. So there you have it. You have a distinct or a separate, so my tuple and tuple 2 still exist, but you've created a third tuple where you used a joint. So this here, joint both of them together. It joined them into one bigger tuple. Okay, so it's possible to do that. Good. So now, how about stepping through the items of a tuple using a for loop? Or if you want, you could use a while loop if you want. But can it see, so can a basic for tuple item in, and let's look at tuple 3. My tuple 3. Can I actually print each item? Right? So what I'm saying here is that I have an item where I'm going to be looking at Joe 7, 7, and 819. Let's see what happens. And sure enough, Joe 7, 7, and 819. So it's very easy to use a for loop, for example, to step through the elements of a tuple. Okay? So what if I change it to tuple only? So that will be Joe and 7. As you can see here, Joe and 7. So it's all up to you what you want, which tuple you want to open up and see what's in it. So, okay, what methods are associated with tuples? So if I said my tuple and hit a dot, oops, wrong tuple. So if I type my tuple, there you go, and hit a dot here, then I have two methods here that I can use, count and index. Okay? I can find, for example, how many items were, let's say, my tuple 3, how many times I have 7. So let's go ahead and print this. My tuple 3 count 3 dot count, and we want to know how many 7s do I have. So let's see what value we get at the bottom here when this is done. And there you have it. You get 2 here. That tells me I have 2 7s in my tuple 3, and indeed I do. Now if I change this to, let's say, 6, well, we don't have anything like that. We get a 0 at the bottom. So you could use that. So let's go ahead and learn about unpacking a tuple. In other words, we're going to assign variables to every member of a tuple. So let me start from scratch here, and let's clean this up. And let's go ahead and create a tuple, let's say, that has this, my tuple equals, and let's say it has these values. Car, boat, plane, okay, well, let's say we have these 3 values in there, right? So if we print this tuple, okay, we get these values. Now, what if we wanted to assign a variable for each one of these, right? So how do we go about that? Well, let's call our variables var1, var2, var3. You could do this. var1, comma, var2, comma, var3, okay, and equals my tuple. Now, let's look at each variable by itself. So let's go to var1 and print it. So we're going to print var1. And let's go ahead and print var2. And let's go ahead and print var3 and see what do we get back. Car, boat, and plane. This is called unpacking. So you are using variables to unpack the content of a tuple using your own variables in this manner. Okay? All right, so that concludes our lesson for tuples. Our next lesson will be about sets. See you then.